Hey everyone, we're going to talk about the origins of the Cold War today and something called the arms race. To understand what the Cold War is, you have to look at the very end of World War II. So at the end of World War II, President Truman of the United States decided to defeat Japan. The United States needed to drop atomic bombs both on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And the whole world saw these massive, deadly, destructive weapons that the United States had. And what this started was a want and desire for both allies of the United States, but also adversaries, enemies of the United States, to acquire their own atomic bombs, to figure out how to make them. And particularly, Truman dropped the bombs on Japan to show the Soviet Union what kind of power the United States had, as Truman knew that after World War II was over, that the Soviets, being a communist country, would likely take aggressive actions in Europe to spread communism. And that's exactly what's going to happen. So this period of tension is going to be called the Cold War. So let's differentiate it from a hot war first. And we've seen at this point every war that the United States has had before the Cold War has been a hot war. So a hot war just involves actual fighting and military hostilities between two countries or more. So the Spanish-American War between America and Spain was a hot war. World War One between all the nations most of these nations in Europe and the United States was a hot war. World War II, which we have just concluded, was a hot war. There's actual fighting, there's actual hostilities that result in fighting and death between these nations. Now, a Cold War is a lot different. So a Cold War is more like a competition between countries that can get pretty heated. So there's no actual direct fighting between the people in the war. Fighting may happen, but it might be through proxies, through other countries that aren't really involved, but what the two countries might try to push some ideological change on. But really, the Cold War represents that there's fear that fighting may break out. So basically, a war is cold until it becomes hot. So there's always this threat of war, this threat of fighting happening. And if that happens, now that the United States has nuclear weapons and soon to be other nations might have nuclear weapons, war could be very, very dangerous. So it's more about fear of war breaking out. It's usually represented by a lot of high tensions. In this case, this Cold War that we're going to speak of will have lots of fears of others, foreigners, immigrants, fears of spies. And this is really the only one that we've really ever had, and it's the Cold War. So let's look a little more at it. So the Cold War is going to be between the two real superpowers that emerge after World War II. The United States, as you see in orange, and the Soviet Union or Russia that you see in Asia, that's in green right here. So the Soviet Union may also be known as the USSR. So here's the difference between the two. So the United States is what we call a capitalist country. That means you, if you're in the United States, make your own economic decisions. You can buy what you want. You can sell what you want. You could do whatever job you want. You make pretty much all the economic decisions for yourself and your family. The Soviet Union is a communist country, and this capitalism versus communism as a philosophy is going to be what drives the Cold War. In a communist country, the government really makes the economic decisions for you, and all the wealth is aimed to be shared equally. That's the ultimate goal of communism, though the world's never really had a pure communist country. But the goal is to share wealth, and the government will facilitate that. So the government chooses basically what you have, where you live, what kind of job you have, how much money you earn. At least that's the ideal circumstances for a communist country. So in this sense, we have competition between these two different philosophies, these two different ideologies, these two different beliefs. Capitalism versus communism. Will the government make your economic decisions with communism? Will you really not have the freedom to be who you want, to do what you want, to buy what you want? And society, you're collectively doing what's best for society, potentially? Or is it like the or is it a is the better system the United States system of capitalism, where people are free to make their own economic decisions, where they can have freedom to buy what they want, live where they want, sell what they want, be whatever they want, have any job they want, any career that they want? Two very, very different philosophies. So this Cold War is going to really be about a few things. So a competition between those two philosophies, but it also boils down into competition of which one of these types of philosophies can create better technology, which country, the United States or the Soviet Union, is able to achieve better technology. Does capitalism result in better technology, or does communism? Who's going to have better weapons? Is capitalism going to result in that, or is communism going to result in that? Which one is going to have stronger people, smarter people, stronger capabilities? Capitalism or communism? U.S. or the USSR? In all, we could really sum it up in who will have the most successful country? Which ideology, capitalism or communism, will result in the most successful country, the most successful superpower? Who will emerge from this Cold War as the true superpower? And that's all that's going to happen in this war, is about this question for the most part. And there's going to be flare-ups here and there. But initially, right after the bombs are dropped, the Soviet Union tries to answer this question and starts a competition with the United States over weapons. So August 6, 1945, Japan has the atomic bombs dropped on them. Over 500,000 people are going to be killed. The Soviet Union takes notice, tries to develop their own weapons, and now the Soviet Union and the US are in a competition for better weapons. Who's going to be the most powerful country? Who's going to have the best weapons? Who's going to be achieving better technology? So now this is the race that's happening. One of the races, because there's two. And this is what we call the arms race. And arm is just another word for a weapon. So we saw that happened at the end of World War II. Well, let's fast forward 4 years later. The Soviet Union now has caught up. They have dropped their first atomic bomb. And the United States now realizes 4 years later that the Soviet Union is racing them, is trying to be more powerful than them. The US isn't just the strongest country in the world now. They don't have the strongest weapon. The Soviet Union also has one. So what does the US have to do? They have to go out and get even better weapons. So here's the US. Now we're going 1952, 7 years after the US drops their atomic bomb, 3 years after the Soviets dropped theirs. So the US now tests an even more powerful bomb called the hydrogen bomb. Now the hydrogen bomb is 1,000 times more powerful than those first atomic bombs, the Fat Man and the little boy that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan. So much, much stronger. So now the US is ahead in the arms race. They have atomic bombs and hydrogen bombs. The Soviet Union just has an atomic bomb. So the Soviet Union even comes back further, October 30th, 1961, quite a few years later, 9 years later. They drop a bomb that's really known as Tsar Bomba. And the Soviet Union was able to create this explosion with Tsar Bomba that is the largest explosion that has ever been detonated in the world, even to this day in 2020. So this creates a lot of fear. This whole race with these bombs, this arms race, creates a lot of fear that Americans at home here in the US will be bombed by the Soviet Union. And it can kill millions of people. So especially when you look at the size of an atomic bomb versus Tsar Bomba, as you see right here. So this arms race is characteristic of the Cold War. Who's going to be the stronger country? Who is going to be more powerful and have a more successful country? But also a fear that what if this Cold War turns hot? What if the United States and the Soviet Union have a hot war that goes on and it stops being cold and both nations drop bombs on each other and then both people lose? That's called MAD, or mutually assured destruction. So that's an intro to what the Cold War is and the arms race that kind of personifies it. We'll talk about another race next time called the space race. Thanks, guys.